Welcome to the second fleet showcase on the channel. Today, the bad guys of the Dropfleet Commander universe, the dreaded Scourge. First of all, the Escort class vessels in the Scourge fleet. So at the front here on the left-hand side, these are 4 Gargoyle class frigates. These are equivalent to the New Orleans class frigates in the UCM fleet, and their primary purpose is for landing assault dropships on objectives. Behind them, there are 4 Harpy class frigates. These are the equivalent to the sort of workhorse gun type frigates in other fleets and have some of the standard Scourge Oculus beam type weapons. Then you've got 4 Jin class frigates here. Their rough equivalent in the UCM fleet would be the Taipei class missile frigates, in that their mission is to engage the enemy at much closer range, as they're equipped with, you can see on the sides there, plasma weaponry that is used for the knife fight range that space battles might take place at in some circumstances. And finally at the front here, these are probably my favourite escort vessels in the Scourge fleet. These are 3 Succubus class destroyers, and they're quite tough and manoeuvrable, a bit bigger than the frigates that they come with. And as you can see, they've got a variety of weapons common to the Scourge fleet across them, so they've got both the Oculus beams and close-in plasma weaponry. And I particularly like the design of those. Those are in contrast to the plastic Scourge frigates around them, resin miniatures. And as opposed to some of the problems I had with the UCM and PHR fleets, actually the Scourge resin products had the least defects. I think these had a couple of little things that needed cleaning up, but apart from that were free of some of the more difficult to correct problems that I found in some of the other resin products. And that is all of the escorts in the Scourge fleet at the moment, because the Scourge fleet is using a bit more of a perhaps cruiser doctrine, in that I've gone for a larger quantity of cruiser type hulls to make up the fleet. But we'll move on to those next and examine some of the different types. So here we have the sort of mid-weight ship-of-the-line cruiser displacement vessels that make up the Scourge fleet. So there are 10 in total, and I've broken them into sort of relatively similar groups to have a look at them. So at the back here, you've got 3 of the more specialist cruisers, if you like, with the one with the large maw at the front. That is a Chimera class cruiser, and it's basically a massive troop transporter. So unlike the lighter frigate class vessels that drop dropships, this one is there to invade ground targets or support ground targets en masse with large quantities of troops transported by bulk landers. Then next to it, you've got 2 Hydra class cruisers, and these are actually carriers. These are the Scourge's main fleet carriers. As you can see on the flanks there, they've sacrificed some of the other pointy vanes that you see on the other cruisers in favour of what amounts to their drop bays and launch bays for fighters and bombers. And there are currently 2 of those in the fleet. Then here at the front, these are some of the workhorse cruisers of the Scourge fleet. The left-hand 2, those are Sphinx class cruisers, and they're roughly equivalent to sort of the Rios in the UCM fleet, in that they're armed with a sort of ubiquitous ocular beam ray at the front there, for engaging the enemy, and then a variation to their right. This is an Ifrit class cruiser, and as you can see on the sides of the prow, it's got a couple of what in Scourge terms called furnace cannons that are the rough equivalent to the burn-through lasers seen in the UCM fleet. Then moving to the rear here, these are actually 2 medium and 2 light cruisers. So the 2 at the front, they're Wyvern class cruisers, and they're what you might call like a close-up brawler or a close assault type cruiser, as their weaponry is largely focused at short range, a bit like the Jin class frigates to the rear right over there. And then behind them, or alongside them, there are 2 Strix class light cruisers, and essentially their mission profile is very, very similar to the Wyverns, only they're of the light cruiser build, so slightly less displacement, slightly less ability to absorb damage, but with the same close-in weapon systems. And that is all 10 of the light to middleweight, if you want to call it that, cruisers that make up the Scourge fleet. So the final entries in my Scourge fleet are those that you see before you. So I don't have any battlecruiser displacement vessels in the Scourge fleet, as I don't particularly like the models for those. But what I do have here on the left and right are 2 Shenlong class heavy cruisers, and you can see they're distinguished by the extra spiky front parts that come up in a crest from the front of the vessel and around the prow, and they've got additional Oculus beam weapons. So it can pump out more firepower than the average cruiser, and they're flanking what is my favourite miniature at the moment in the fleet. This is a Demon class battleship. This is another resin model, and again, didn't have a great number of flaws to rectify. It's actually great fun to put together because all of those sections that make up the main body of the hull running up and backwards, and all of the sort of wings and fins and vanes can all be articulated slightly differently, so you can get different kinds of sort of almost like different poses out of the miniature, which is quite nice to put together and quite easy to do as well. And I'm quite fond of that miniature. I might get another one of these, but equip it as the Dragon class, which has got launch bays instead. But that is the centerpiece and flagship of this fleet. And that is it. That is all of the ships in the Scourge fleet currently in the collection. I haven't got any outstanding miniatures that still need painting. As I say, I might consider adding another battleship to the fleet, but apart from that, it's complete and ready to go. So I hope you've enjoyed this second showcase. The only remaining fleet that I have in my collection yet to show you is my PHR fleet. So look forward to that in an upcoming video, and in the meantime, happy hobbying.